Most of the legal system, while we talk about operating on precedent, right? We want to do the same thing over and over again. What we're actually really doing is looking for the exception. Why is this person's case different? And how do I handle that difference? Right. And so we're always taught like the black letter law. And then we read the case that's the exception to that black letter law. Legal technology is exactly the same, right? There's never going to be a one size fits all solution for every problem that comes into your law firm. And so you should be picking tools that enable you to deliver a great client experience for both the everyday run of the mill client, and I'm going to throw some air quotes up there for that phrase, as well as the client who has the exceptional circumstances.
Is your practice going to be replaced by robots? Should we run screaming away from the impending tech overlords? This week on 5-Star Counsel, we're talking with Joshua Lenon, the lawyer in residence at Clio. Now, earlier this year, Joshua was in the process of reviewing dozens of new legal technology options across various categories, looking for the best of what's coming next. When we recorded, he hadn't published those reviews yet, so we didn't get into specifics in the interview. But he sheds light on the trends of new legal tools, including integrated suites that create a seamless ecosystem that you'll be using in the near future. But if you're listening to this, you know it's not just the technology that clients come for. We are more than the middleman that knows how to use a particular piece of tech. So we'll discuss the human element of applying legal tech and how we should pick tools that enable us to better serve our clients, both the average clients we see on a daily basis and the exceptional clients we see once a quarter or even on more rare occasions. And how we should pick tools that enable us to better serve our clients, both the average clients we see several times a week and the exceptional clients we see once or twice a year. Finally, we'll examine how to approach integrating new tech into your practice and how to evaluate whether a product is a good fit or even necessary. Let's get to the interview. I'm John Strohmeyer, and this is the 5-Star Counsel podcast. The market for legal services is shifting, and lawyers who don't adapt will be left behind. This podcast gives you a competitive edge in today's market by sharing the client service lessons you probably didn't learn in law school or in law practice. Let's start the show. Hey 5-Star listeners, before we start, I want to tell you about our amazing sponsor, Smith AI. Smith AI is a virtual receptionist service for small businesses with a specialty in working with solo and small law firms. I signed up with them within weeks of starting my firm because they are affordable for even the smallest solo practice. Their friendly receptionists respond to potential clients in Spanish or English, screen and schedule new leads, and can even take payments. And now they're answering calls 24 hours a day. So even when you're asleep, they're still working. Even beyond the phone, they've got live agents and chatbots ready to capture leads on your website, by text, and by Facebook Messenger. Smith's friendly gatekeepers can staff your front line so you can work uninterrupted. You can finally have the peace of mind that while you're working, you're not missing out on future work. Plans start at just $70 a month for calls and $100 a month for chats. Smith AI is offering a free trial, and our podcast listeners get an extra $100 discount code with promo code 5-Star. That's FIVESTAR. Sign up and learn more at www.smith.ai. Don't let another day go by. Try Smith AI. Hey, Josh, thanks for joining us today.
It's great to be here, John. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Oh, of course. So by the time our dear listeners hear this, you will have we're embargoing this episode so you can finish releasing your 31 days of tech that have been extended a little bit longer. But I really like that you were going through picking out new and different things and kind of showing what can be done. And selfishly, I wanted you to just tell me what the answers were. Really, I'm just using this podcast mostly for free consulting and then sharing my learnings with anybody who wants to listen. So before I hand it over to you to kind of get some broad thoughts on this, the idea is tech is here to help, but in a quote I sent over to y'all at the end of last year, it's not just technology that's going to save lawyers. It's how can we humanize the tech? Because if we just have pure technology, it's not a bad thing, but you end up looking like Amazon where there's nearly zero slack in the system. And you still want to have some human interaction with that tech because it'll give you the ability to adjust on the fly because our clients aren't all the same. We're not just ordering, 10 pounds of whatever. We're not ordering 10 gallons of legal through an app. Each of those products, that legal advice has to get adapted to the client. So we still want to mediate it a bit through a human. And this is where you come in. You've picked 31 out of the gazillions of technology options out there. I'm going to hand it over to you two for a minute. Like, Josh, what have you learned? Where are we going?
So it's actually been a really great project. And so all of the tech that I reviewed were people who volunteered to be a part of this program. And I want to highlight that they put themselves up for scrutiny. And I think you raised a good point on the need for there to be a human element to legal technology. I think that's important for two reasons. First, lawyers have an ethical obligation of oversight, right? And so you can never remove the human element ethically because you need to be a part of that delivery chain. And we need to realize that going forward. But I think the second reason that a human element is so important when it comes to the application of legal technology is because most of the legal system, while we talk about operating on precedent, right? We want to do the same thing over and over again. What we're actually really doing is looking for the exception. Why is this person's case different? And how do I handle that difference? Right. And so we're always taught like the black letter law. And then we read the case that's the exception to that black letter law. Legal technology is exactly the same, right? There's never going to be a one size fits all solution for every problem that comes into your law firm. And so you should be picking tools that enable you to deliver a great client experience for both the everyday run of the mill client, and I'm going to throw some air quotes up there for that phrase, as well as the client who has the exceptional circumstances. And every client feels they have exceptional circumstances, but there will be the ones that really do challenge you to fit them into the existing processes and make sure that they really get the representation that they deserve. And your tech should be supporting both of those occurrences.
The looking for the exceptions, that is just such a great point. And now I'm going to stop interrupting you and let you get back.
It's okay. So in the technology offerings that I review, I actually take a look at a couple of different categories. Remember, everybody volunteered, so it wasn't I went looking for these categories. It's what emerged, and so we saw tools that are really focused on helping lawyers organize in a variety of contexts. So Deal Closer, Proxy App, Proxy Legal, which are both tools for really helping move forward a particular type of workflow. So Deal Closer is all about kind of your transactional deals. Proxy is all about your legal department project management. Avoca, which is contract management. They're all really looking at how do we get organized and centralized. Tracklight is another great example of this. But then there are also some tools that try to flip whom they're helping. And they're focused a lot more on the client and how are we helping the client in their type of activities. Now, there are several ways that we do this. It might be that we're bringing on board client information and making it easier for the clients to provide a lot of that information. So Smith AI, Ruby Reception are great examples where we're taking a technology and a service and putting it into the client's hands. So Smith AI will have different types of onboarding. A lot of customer service can be handled through Ruby Reception. And it gives the client a good experience, but it also takes that client's knowledge and then transfers it to the lawyer so that they can apply that best in breed knowledge, right? They can find the exceptions that we were talking about before. And then there's a class of technology that's really just about helping lawyers learn how to do their job better. And so a hotshot is an example of this, which is on-demand training for lawyers. But you can also see it in things like Law Insider and LexUb, which are enabling lawyers to go out and find precedents, right? And apply knowledge in a variety of different ways. And it's that centralize your information, put technology in the hands of the clients, and then also train lawyers to be better in the particular situations in which they find themselves were some of the trends that I found along the way. And then there's just a class of tools that really just dig in and try to help the lawyers create better work product. And so one that you and I are both familiar with is Word Rake. And I found them to be just absolutely amazing in terms of helping lawyers produce better work product from the tools that they're already using. Another one, and this is a kind of a new startup that people haven't been exposed to yet, and it's Found Fusion out of Seattle. And what they focus on is document lineage, which I found really interesting. So it's kind of, yeah, half e-discovery, half centralization and organization of your own files, but being able to see where is a document changing over time as I'm using it, as I'm sharing it, as I'm manipulating it, and how do I very easily go back and forth between documents in time, which is something that I think a lot of tools support, but don't always support in a way that makes kind of this chronological sense, right? I can see version 1, version 2, version 3, but I don't really know the difference between these two. And Found Fusion, I think, interestingly, has come up with some really good user interfaces for dealing with document lineage and making sure that you can carry a document's history with you as opposed to having to carry it solely in your memory.
So another great tool that I found really helpful was Codepars, which is a tool that takes complex documents, so self-referential documents, documents with lots of defined and undefined terms, and made it really easy for you to investigate that document. I don't know about you, John, but whenever I get a really complex document, what I ended up having to do was print it out because I would read clause number 3 refers to clause number 8, which refers to clause number 10. And so it's me and my sticky notes and flipping back and forth, right? To really try and figure out what the heck was clause 3 talking about when it incorporated all these other clauses by reference. Or there's some capitalized word that hopefully is in the definition section of this document. Oh, wait, does it have a definition section of this document? And what Codepars does is it basically creates this great interface where by parsing the document using a little bit of machine learning programming in the background, it can actually index the entire document for you and create these pop-ups so that when clause 3 talks about clause 8, I can click on that phrase, clause 8, and up pops clause 8, and I can read it in its entirety and apply it into clause 3 without losing my place. And if I were trying to do that on a single electronic document, I would basically be infinitely scrolling back and forth, up and down to try and figure that out. So my options to date were print, but not now. Now I have Codepars, and it makes it so much more efficient for me to review a document and get a sense of that document overall. So it's those types of tools that I found really interesting and not as widely adopted as you would think at this time.
So, Josh, that's really interesting because it reminds me of a project I worked on once, where in landfills you have methane that comes off, and that can be collected and then sold for reuse. So we had these basic contracts that were forms were filled out. We couldn't change that, but you would add addendums and other addendum and other addenda. And the only way I could make it work, and the reason I got to keep doing this, was I took the basic contract, turned it into a Word document, and then I would take all the addenda, cut those apart, and then make my own, essentially a red line where, here, this gets struck out, and here's the block of text. And I could then print it out and read it because the basic contract says this, then the standard addenda would tell you, clause 4.3 doesn't work, so we're going to read this into it. But then the specific deal addenda would make changes to both of them. And it sounds like you're just feeding all of this into the hopper, and hopefully that's what they're doing. And if not, Codepars, I'll take my consultancy check.
They do. They feed it all into the hopper. But it's simple things that were just mind blowing to me in playing with this tool, like the ability to have 2 copies of the document up at the same time and not have them kind of like overwriting each other, but just I have the document up, and in my left hand side, I'm looking at clause 3. I'm just going to keep that hypothetical going. And on the right hand side, I'm looking at clause 8, and I can see them side by side without having to trick Word or Adobe Acrobat to look at the same document twice, right? I don't have to save a copy and open a copy in another window. It just says, you want to look at this document in 2 places? Sure, let's do that. And just the fact that it does something like that just greatly speeds up the ability to review a document, and it makes the lawyer more efficient. And so if you're having those run-of-the-mill clients or those run-of-the-mill documents, right, that you can just work your way through quickly, that's great. And then when you have the exception, the incredibly complex document, you can turn it into this great workflow that works for you. And they claim that it helps lawyers review documents about 3 times faster. And I have to be honest, I believe them.
And I can hear some lawyers out there screaming right now of like, "Oh my God, you're throwing away our jobs. You've turned it over to a machine." Number one, quiet. We have the ethical duties, no matter how we're charging to get this done right. But what we're not doing with this is saying you're not important. We're just trying to streamline it so that you, the lawyer, can get better answers. I've heard some lawyers say, well, part of the reason we draft so terribly is so people need us to read it. I think that's awful. And if you're doing that, stop. But the second part is if you understand it better, you can focus on what's really there. You're not going to hopefully make some of those common mistakes of dropping those terms.
Mm-hmm.
And then the side project that I'm really getting at long term is most of us should be getting away from the billable hour anyway, just because that's not useful. It is a lie on both sides. Ultimately, we're not tracking our time as best we should, and it's a rough approximation of what we're doing when we can't parcel it out. I'm going to share not really a secret about Clio's billing practices. Y'all aren't charging us by how much we use you. It's by the year, and it's for access, and that's because it just doesn't make sense any other way. Ultimately, clients are going to prefer to know what you're on the hook for. And if you're charging for document review by the hour, it's just, I'm going to spend way too much time going down that hole. I'm going to try and pull it back. My monologue on hourly rates will end here, Josh. So you were talking about like the Bolton Tools as its own category. Is there anything else in that category that we need to come back to, or anything else there?
So I think the Bolton Tools are where most smaller law firms actually are really seeking. They don't want to reinvent their workflows. They just want to have it be easier. And so bolt-on tools like Found Fusion, like Codepars, like WordRake are absolutely phenomenal additions to a lawyer's arsenal, because it takes what you're already doing and where you're already comfortable, and it turns that into a supercharged version. An example that I like to include is Fastcase, one of the participants in 31 Days of Legal Tech. They've got a great plugin for Microsoft Word, and they can just scan down the cases that are included in a brief or a memo or a reply and give you links to them so that you can go and read them quickly and easily. And given that virtually every lawyer in the United States has access to Fastcase, why would you not throw that into Microsoft Word right now?
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I like that. It's the small wins. This is where you can start right now. Find the tool. I mean, I use WordRake. I love it.
Mm-hmm.
When I find the little mistakes where it's being a little aggressive on the word choice, or it's rewriting a sentence it shouldn't, sending that back so they can see it. But it's super easy to use. It just ends up being one more little option at the top of Word for me.
Yeah.
And I agreed. Like, you don't have to upend your practice for some of these tech things. It's finding the easy wins.
Yeah. And some of the tools that I look at are incredibly powerful. And most of what they take is just install them into a tool that you already have. A couple examples would be add-ons to Clio. So Clio has a lot of integration partners. I know you, John, you use some of them, and there are over 200 available. There are a handful that we included as a part of this review. Again, they were volunteer. And it was great to see how these two programs can complement each other. So an example would be Next Chapter, which helps bankruptcy lawyers with the very specific workflows that they need for bankruptcy, right? It's a national practice area. There's really kind of one set of standards, but it is, and this is not a disparagement, a niche, right? Just like almost every practice area is a niche. And so it's really difficult for Clio, that's building for hundreds of thousands of law firms all at once, to build a niche feature. And Next Chapter said, we'll take that niche, and they took it on. And so you can use these complementary programs to really create the best experience for you as the lawyer, but also the best outcomes for your clients.
Exactly, because the clients are coming to us for a result. One of the things I rail on is experience is not unimportant, but most of the advice that comes out about customer experience, client experience, guest experience are from the Disneys, the Four Seasons, and the Ritz-Carltons. But when you go to those companies, you're going on your off day. If somebody said you've got a free Saturday and a blue sky budget, where are you going? You're going to pick one of those companies. You're not going to pick, there may be one law firm out there where you say, no, I'm going to go over there, but really that's not going to happen. And that's fine. We just need to understand that it kind of skews the lessons we should take from them and makes us want to think about those lessons. And the experience part really comes down to how can we make it easy for everybody involved, owners, employees, and the clients, but also speed it up. How can we get people through the system, get their results faster? So how can we speed up the review of that contract by taking something that is just, bloody mess and turning it into, here's one straight through read? That's what we're looking for, is how do we make it easier for us to deliver our technical knowledge?
Yeah. And at the end of the day, if you aren't using a tool like this, it actually is probably a worse outcome for your client. So, and any of these tools that I mentioned, right? You're going to miss something if you're relying solely upon the infallible human brain. Lawyers are smart, but we're not perfect. And if we can get a helping hand here or there, it's not a bad idea to invest in that. And the turnaround from that is that the outcomes become something demonstrable for our clients. So when I'm reviewing a complex document, the outcome may be there's no issue. This document is really badly written and confusing, but not going to be an issue for the client and their desires and their goals. Oh, and here's a bill for $5,000. Right? That is an awful, awful experience. But if I can take that and turn it into, hey, this document's confusing and awful and a mess, there's no issues, here's a bill for $2,000, hopefully that client will be much more likely to come back to me with multiple $2,000 quick review documents. Definitely the treadmill I want to be on.
Right. And, from me, the $2,000 versus $5,000 bill, I have less of a issue with. It's, can we tell them it's going to be a $2,000 bill or a $5,000 bill before they tell us to do the project? What we don't like, and what we unfortunately get ourselves into, is I don't know, and I'll tell you on the other side, versus just accepting some of that risk and saying, look, I'm going to charge you $2,000 for this because I know it's going to take me, this is the amount of work that it will take. Now I'm slowly sliding back into my diatribe on hourly rates. So we had those big categories of the organizational, the helping clients get things faster, helping lawyers, and then kind of the bolt-on tools. Any other broad categories in there?
Well, I do want to go back to the lawyer training because I found there were some really interesting innovations there. So Hotshot with their on-demand training, I really liked. And there was one that kind of blew my mind because I never thought about it as a training tool. And it's just VR. They are a VR headset virtual environment for lawyers. At first, I thought it was an attempt to kind of recreate the jury trial experience, but I could not figure out how you would get 12 people off the street to wear VR headsets in the COVID age, right? Because obviously we're having trouble with juries. And instead, it turned out to be this phenomenal tool that enables lawyers to create their own practice environments. So
tell me more.
Yeah, here's a virtual courthouse. I, as a young lawyer, have never really presented a trial. How do I learn even which table do I sit at? Which is governed in every courthouse as you go to, right? Depending on your role, the plaintiff sits here, the opposing party sits here, or the defendant sits here, right? What is going to be the experience of trying to present to both a judge and a jury at the same time? And how do I control my presence in doing that? And so this tool, which is now being used by law firms and law schools, is really becoming an environment where you can create your trial prep, experience it somewhat in a real-esque environment, and get feedback and mentorship on the work that you're doing. So it's a great way for you to practice your opening statement. It's a great way for law students to learn the ins and outs of a courthouse. If I'm going to be admitting this physical piece of evidence as a part of a trial, what really are the steps involved in that? And I can't go to a courthouse now to watch that, but I can go to a virtual courthouse and practice it and learn it and get feedback from my mentors and other people that we bring in. You can even do witness prep where they can experience what it's going to be like in a courtroom. So it's a really interesting application of a technology that I thought could never fit in a law firm. And now there's this novel use out there, and I really enjoy it.
Yeah, because selfishly, I was thinking, what would I do with a VR app and my estate planning practice? There's not an obvious application. Even when I do go to court, they're for uncontested hearings. I'm in and out usually in a few minutes. I'm not doing depots or anything else like that. But even thinking through, this is what it would look like having, eventually we'll probably go back to live hearings in place, having the associates who work for me or whoever it is know this is what it's going to look like, or even putting, I'm sure you could output the visuals that are coming into somebody just so a client can see this is what your day would look like.
Yeah, that's absolutely it. They talked about witness prep, for example, right? So what's it going to look like when you are getting input from a judge, right? That is interacting with your lawyer. You're going to be presenting to a jury, right? Your testimony. How can you do that in a way that is authentic and sympathetic, right? These are all things that are very difficult to practice right now over Zoom, but can be better addressed in a virtual environment and bring that client a little farther along to what the actual day is going to be, while still creating a safe environment in a pandemic for them. So it's a really interesting moment.
Interesting. So that looks like about 5 different categories. Any other broad categories to think about?
I think that's mostly it. Yeah.
Okay. So let's zoom out and take a different look at this. The trends, any trends you can pull out of, like, not only where have we come, I heard the niching down, the making it easier for clients and lawyers, but not so much where do these all fit in, but what's the trend line? Where are we going? What do you expect to see next from some of these places?
So I definitely think there's going to be a greater degree of collaboration between not just these tools, but legal technology in general. It's a trend that's been going on for years, but I think we're hitting the part where there's a little bit of exhaustion with a lot of the lawyers out there on constantly being pitched a new tool that only does one thing. And a lot of the tools that I looked at are really good at what they do. But then I found, how would I tie this in to be somewhat difficult, right? A great example is Mobile Rev. They are a mobile device e-discovery tool, right? So how do we get all this information out of mobile devices and turn it into something that is discoverable? An absolutely great tool, but we're finding that once you have that information, then where do you take it? And they work very closely with relativity, and that's a great example of it. But then I have to go from this tool to relativity, from relativity to my case management, from my case management to my e-filing, and having separate tech stacks for each of that is going to be challenging and continue to be challenging. And so I'm looking toward legal technology that starts pulling all of those together. You're a big fan of Zapier for making kind of these automated leaps between tools. And I think we're going to see a legal technology platform start making these leaps on behalf of law firms. And the winners of 31 Days of Legal Tech are going to be the tools that build into those types of platforms.
It's very definitely there are too many tools. It's hard to pick and choose because the shiny object syndrome is very real. Like, oh, this sounds great. I have definitely invested in tools and then not had the ability to make them work within the rest of not only my tech stack, but just the practice itself. And being able to have something and build it out and have it work and then say, look, this is going to be good enough for now. As an example, I use Calendly. I've used it for years. I know people love Acuity, and there's one other that's, I'm not going to remember it now, but all of the scheduling apps generally get about the right work done. You can have some new features. They're all, Calendly is going to integrate and make their version a little bit better. And that's the point is, you find the one that works for you. And then lucky for them, you get locked in because, like right now, there's almost, I'm not going to say almost no way, but like I love Calendly. It's built into our systems and our Zaps and everything else. I don't want to move because that's going to be a big headache. And the other side of it is, well, even if there are some kind of incremental gains, the inertia to switch is going to be difficult. So the more that we can kind of get those one-off products that do solve several pain points for our particular practice, the new chapter or next chapter that can pick up and say, all right, bankruptcy attorneys, come over here. You don't have to adapt wealth counsel's series of document automations or whatever it is. Yeah, so I like that idea of, consolidation, if nothing else.
Yeah, and consolidation of the user experience. So it might still be a couple of different tools, but it'll be seamless for the user, how they all fit together. Rather than I get work done here and then I take that output and I have to kind of physically or manually manipulate it into the second. Yeah. Instead, they're going to be a suite of tools that work together. And a lot of law firms have built their own. You're really great at that. And we're going to see now the legal technology companies building that integrated suite on behalf of law firms everywhere.
Right. So we're not going to have to filter it all through Zapier to get our answers from them. We can have those, have them starting to reach out to do the work for us and hopefully build in things that are a little bit faster and easier.
Yeah.
So
and I think it goes even a little bit beyond the law firm itself. We're going to start seeing an integration of those client experience tools to the law firm tools. We're going to start seeing the integration of a company's contract management tool with their legal vendors, just like we somewhat see legal billing tools start to integrate. It's really going to become a much more seamless ecosystem of all of the stakeholders out there. So when we talk about a platform behind all of this, it's a really big deal.
So as we start to wrap up, one of the things I want to get you to think about is we've got so many tools. I've already outlined one of the pitfalls that I see of there are a lot of shiny objects out there. Do you see any other potential pitfalls for attorneys facing this nearly unlimited tech stack?
So I do think you need to take the time to, one, do your due diligence, as always, with a new vendor, but also take the time to really make sure you're getting your money's worth. It's really easy to add a bunch of new tools and not be getting the full value of them. We see this every day with people who just don't know how to use the software they already have. So as you're looking at new tools, do ask yourself, could I do this with what I already have? And if so, why am I not? And then bring in the new tool with a return on investment kind of in mind already. What am I and my client getting out of this tool? Am I creating more time for myself to focus on billable work? Am I creating a better client experience? Am I ensuring a better class of work product? Like all of these are outcomes that could be worthy of an investment. And so pick the one that focuses on this particular tool and make sure that you're measuring yourself against that outcome, right? I'm a month in, I've been using this great tool. Does it meet the goal that I had in mind? And that way you really will start be getting the most out of your technology.
Excellent, Josh. I think that's a great place for us to wrap things up. People want to learn more about the tech. By the time this comes out, you will have posted everything. Where can they find that full wrap up?
So there'll be an entire playlist on YouTube. So 31 Days of Legal Technology is what it's called. There'll also be a published post listing all of these categories that we've discussed and kind of walking through some of the implications about them with links to all of the reviews as well.
Excellent. Josh, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you, John. I always enjoy our conversations.
Thanks so much for listening. You can find more info on us and get your free white paper on client service at 5starcounsel.com. You can get in touch with me at john@5starcounsel.com. If you enjoyed the podcast, please subscribe wherever fine podcasts are found and leave us a review wherever you can.